is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? Story 1. When I worked in the medical field, I had a dream one night about a patient of mine, a very kind elderly woman, whom I visited once or twice a week. In the dream, she came to me, dancing, and called out to me that she wasn't hurting anymore. I was so happy watching her dance after seeing her decline for years. When I got to work the next morning, I told my coworkers about the dream, and later that morning we got the call from her daughter that she had passed away the night before. I cannot explain that, but I am glad I had told my coworkers about it before the call and not after. Otherwise, they'd never have believed me. Such a bizarre experience, but so wonderful to feel she was at peace. Story 2. Fall 2009, I was sick. Like super sick. It was a few weeks before my amputation and I was battling a severe bone infection. I was hopped on all kinds of antibiotics. I had a PICC line and would dose my antibiotics through these little. And pain medication. I'm a huge Yankee fan, so my best friend got us tickets for the ALCS game at Yankee Stadium. She pushed me around the stadium in a wheelchair with a shitton of blankets on me. It was freezing, just to put a smile on my face. My friend leaves our seats to go get some hot dogs and stuff. This is where it gets weird. As soon as she leaves, to my recollection, an older Irish gentleman sits by me. He offers me some of his spiked hot chocolate, but I said no thanks, and explained that I was on a lot of medication. We begin talking, and I told to him what was going on with my life. He asked if I was scared to have my leg amputated, and I told him that I was. I was really frightened of the unknown. He gave me some pretty valuable life advice and comforted me. He assured me that it would be fine. He told me that, if you have to be an amputee, try to be the best amputee that there is. My friend comes back with food and asks who I was talking to. There's no one next to me. I guess I must have hallucinated this, but IDK. It felt more like some kind of angel or being that came to me to let me know it would be okay. I guess my guardian angel is an Irishman with spiked hot chocolate. ETA. Not sure if this makes it more creepy or not, but the Yankees were playing the Angels in that series. Story 3. I once met this young homeless guy, probably about 10 years ago. Acted like he knew me. When I said I had no idea who he was, he said, "Isn't your name Beardmonger and you work in radio broadcasting?" I got right freaked out because I had been applying to colleges for radio, and there was no reason for him to know my name. I said no, but I've wanted to work in radio. Who are you? He responded saying it wasn't important and to ignore him as sometimes he gets confused between the present and the future, and just left. I never saw him again. It threw me off completely. I abandoned the idea to go into radio almost out of fear. Story 4. I was driving home from work on the back roads and was driving behind a car that was the same make, model, and year of my car, just a different color. Further down the road, we both get into the turn lane to turn left onto a long, straight road with open fields on either side. The car in front of me turns onto this road and I wait for a car to pass, and then turn as well. It takes less than 5 seconds. However, when I turn onto the road, the car that had been driving in front of me was nowhere to be seen. This road has no turnoffs and it's long and straight so you can see pretty far ahead of you. The car had just vanished and I still think about it today. I have a dash cam now, but I wish I had had one back then because I question what actually happened that day. Edit. I am 100% sure the car didn't do a U-turn. The roads are really narrow, so they wouldn't have been able to complete the U-turn without having to make it a 3-point turn or drive partly in the field. I also would have noticed because while there was enough time to complete a 90-degree turn in front of the car that was coming from the other direction, there was nowhere near enough time to complete a 180-degree turn without either causing a wreck or something. After I turned onto this road and noticed the car was no longer in front of me, I looked all around me and could see the other car driving away behind me, but the car that looked like mine was nowhere to be seen. There was nowhere on that road where the car could have pulled off or I would have seen it. It was still very light outside, around 6:30 in June, and the road was surrounded by cotton fields, I believe, which do not grow high enough to cover a car. I have gone through every possible explanation, and there just isn't a logical one. Story 5. Squirrel wearing a leaf cape. Edit. Thank you, everyone. Also, yes, this was a real moment. IDK if maybe the leaf was stuck or if the leaves were somehow knotted, but it was so quick. Story 6. I was driving away from a gas station. Out of nowhere, a guy in a suit comes running up to my minivan and starts yanking the door. As if he knew me, he began pleading, "Come on, let me in." Luckily, my doors were locked. I asked him who the he was through my window. He looked genuinely surprised that I wouldn't let him in. After I refused to let him in, his facial expression inverted, as if he just realized something horrible. He let go of my car, said something to the effect of, "You're one of them, aren't you?" Then he ran away behind the gas station and into the woods. Full suit and tie, nice shoes, extremely frantic in nature, zero explanation. I'm praying it was some elaborate troll or meth or something, because the look in that man's eyes was pure terror when I didn't let him in. Story 7. A Very Great Dane. I knew a former neighbor's dog was so afraid of a month-old kitten that he ran into the deepest room of his home and didn't stop quivering and whimpering for several hours. For context, he wasn't a timid dog. Little over a month before the mentioned incident, a drunk man attempted to break into their home at night, and the dog bit half of his left foot off. P.S. Rest in peace, Scoob. Story 8. Standing outside of a convenience store. I saw two different cars park, about a minute or so apart, and go in the store. It was obvious the two didn't know each other, at least it seemed. After shopping, they each left in the other's car. Still can't explain it today without going down the CIA conspiracy route. Story 9. Was sitting in my lounge room alone one night watching TV. Heard clear as day someone coming up the stairs barefoot. I thought it was just a family member coming up the stairs, but then had the realization that I was home alone. For some reason, I just sat there looking at the door, waiting for whatever was coming up these stairs to walk through the door. Heard the staircase creaking and everything. Heard the bare feet get to the top of the stairs, step onto the tiles, and take the 3-4 steps it would take to be in sight of the doorway to the lounge room I'm sitting in. But nothing came through the door, sat there for about 5 seconds waiting. Said to myself out loud, dealing with that right now, and kept watching TV. I've heard other things like glass moving and footsteps and all that. But the second most notable thing I can't explain was me and my mum hearing something talk to our dog downstairs in a mumbled male voice we couldn't understand. If I heard that on my own, I'd have just thought it was my brain playing tricks, but my mum also heard it. Story 10. I was having a sleepover at home with a friend from school. We were watching a film and suddenly the weirdest thought comes to me. Her dog has just passed. Obviously, I cannot just blurt that out. So I weirdly ask in the middle of the film, "Hey, by the way, how was your dog?" She was quite surprised, obviously. I had never met her dog and she doesn't talk much about it. She just mentioned she had one. She answered that he is aging but well. We moved on, but I couldn't shake a weird feeling. Anyway, she goes home the next day and calls me after a while. She asked, "Why did you ask about my dog yesterday? How did you know?" "He passed away last night, around the same time you asked about him." I was both shocked and unsurprised at the same time. I don't have an explanation. It seems like a weird coincidence since her dog was not something usually on my mind. It never happened to me again. Story 11. Not sure this counts. I was in it, but wasn't happening to me. Pull into a fast food drive-thru in Odessa, TX. My first time there. My turn at the speaker, and I place my order. It's been a long drive, so I'm treating myself and being a little picky, asking nicely, and building a customized meal. Cashier listens and says, "Again? You ate all that already?" Me. Huh? Cashier. "Oh, I'm sorry. Someone who sounds just like you was just through here. Placed the exact same order." Me. "Hey, cool. Weird, but cool." I get to the window and the girl looks at me with this exasperated expression, opens the window and says, "It is you." Me. Cashier calls her manager over and points at me, shows him the order, says nothing. Manager. "Welcome back. Was there a problem with your order?" Me. "No, I haven't gotten it yet." Manager, clearly confused. "I made your order myself." Cashier points at time on receipt, manager blinks, and says, "That's the same order." To her, looks at me, back at her, and says, "And that's him." Cashier. I said the same thing. Both of them looked genuinely upset and confused. It got worse when I told them I had never been in Odessa before. As the manager was handing me my food, he laughed and visibly relaxed. "The other guy had long hair," he explained, pointing to my cap. "Like halfway down his back. You just have a twin, I guess, with the same kind of car." His face when I took off my hat and showed him long hair. They might have been messing with me for fun. Shifts get long and people are creative. But if it was a game, they deserved careers in theater, because they looked terrified. Yes, I looked around for copies of my car or self while I was in town. Nada. Edit. Whoa, and wow. Thanks for the awards. No way I can keep up with all of this. Was 1992. Drove about 8 hours. No drugs or alcohol involved. Oh, and my hair was under my backward baseball cap and tucked under a flannel long-sleeve shirt. Not impossible to see. And the angle from the drive-through window might have helped or hurt, dunno. Story 12. Went hiking late at night with my buddy when something big and bright flew right over us above the tree line. It was so bright we couldn't even look at it, and whatever it was, it didn't make a sound. Actually, it was probably the most quiet moment of my life. I remember saying, "What the?" But no sound came out of my mouth. Only lasted a few seconds and it was over. Story 13. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town and our house was old, beat up, and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedrooms as a child. But I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in darkness, with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window and then the next, before pausing, flashing briefly into my bedroom, before shifting into the third and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realized that orb was anything but magic. It was someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. Story 14. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like when I say speeding, I mean at least 25 over the limit. Anyway, this car gets behind me, and for some reason I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full tinted Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me, I got a really eerie feeling I can't explain. Like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop, they would light me up for speeding, but for some reason they just kept pace with me, also speeding themselves. So at this point, I'm getting a little weirded out, so I turn off the freeway and they follow me. I turn into a gas station and get out. I figure if I'm going to get axe murdered, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck rolls its windows down. And what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a heavily disfigured guy, the only likes of which I can compare to that guy Rocky Dennis from the movie about the guy with a crazy disfigured head who falls for that girl who loves him for him and not the abomination that is his face. And he starts to motion me with his finger like telling me to come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers, there was no way in I was going to approach his car. I bolt inside the gas station. At this point, my whole body is shaking. I try and tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm drunk or high off as my story doesn't make any sense. I go to look outside and the truck is gone. I still have nightmares to this day. Story 15. Was driving home from work one afternoon with my brother and cousin in the car. As we were sitting in traffic, I noticed high up in the sky and way out in the distance a small, motionless black square. I pointed it out, and both my brother and my cousin spotted it quickly, so I know it wasn't in my head. It just remained still for about 45 minutes, and then the sun had set, and it was too dark to spot it any longer. It just stayed in the exact same spot the whole time, and while it was really far away, you could still tell it was a perfect square shape. Once I got home, I went online to see if there were any mentions of it anywhere, and there was nothing. To this day, I still think about it and wonder, WTF I was looking at. Story 16. When me and my best friend were teenagers, we were walking home during the wee hours of the morning when a drunk guy basically acted like we knew him and invited us to eat. For some reason, we actually came with him and we ate at this 24/7 joint, where he told us about his adventures around the world, showed pictures, etc. We hung out until it was around 5 a.m. and walked home together. I have no idea who he fucking was. I still don't. Story 17. My grandfather told me a really cool story. There's a couple of things that grow or rot in trees that glow. Google Foxfire. He saw an owl completely covered in this stuff, flying around at night sometime in the 1930s. Edit. Ye blew up. Thanks for all the glowy stories, I miss my grandpa. And for the lulz, I didn't even think of Mozilla. Story 18. I was once standing in line at Target. A mother and her, I guess, 3-year-old were in front of me in the checkout lane. I never met them before in my life. The child was riding in the shopping cart and the mother went forward to better unload it. The child looks dead at me, smiles, laughs, and said my first name very clearly, twice. I have an uncommon first name, which made it even stranger. Edit. No, we didn't have name tags. Just blank white keycards for entering locked areas. The dress code was strictly professional suit and tie. On weekends, I never was into being some company's walking billboard. Story 19. My dad, sister, and I all saw something that wasn't an animal and wasn't human. This was in winter 2015 in rural Saskatchewan. We were driving and it ran out in front of us on the road. It was so fast it was a dark blur, but we all agree we saw long gangly limbs like a deer, but it had human-looking arms and legs. We still talk about it. Story 20. When I was in my 20s in the early 1990s, I had a car accident that kept me in hospital for about a year. It was a Catholic hospital, and most of the nursing staff were nuns, and besides the normal checks, they regularly just stopped in to chat and see how I was doing. Early one morning, there was a knock, and this nun came in that I hadn't seen before and introduced herself as Sister Greta, a member of the nursing staff. She sat on the side of the bed, and we spoke for a few minutes. Then she asked if she could say a prayer for me. She held my hand and said a prayer, then wished me well and left. About 5 minutes later, there was another knock, and one of the regular sisters came in to say hi. I remarked it was going to be a good day because I'd already had one visit from Sister Greta, and now I was getting another one. She said there wasn't a Sister Greta on the staff, and there was only 2 sisters around, it being so early. I pointed to the bed, which clearly showed where she had been sitting, and described her and the habit she had been wearing, now getting a bit unnerved. The sister basically shrugged and bustled off. She came back about half an hour later with a book about the hospital's history and showed me a picture of some nuns from the 50s. Their habits were exactly the same as Sister Greta's that I'd described. Turns out that patients regularly mentioned talking to nuns in old garb that definitely weren't part of the current staff. I never saw her again or anything similar while I was there. Kind of freaky, but not overly disturbing. I can't really explain it, but I guess it's the sort of ghost story I'm okay with, if that's what it was. Edit. Okay, heaps of cool questions that I'll reply to, but a couple of common ones. No, I'm not religious by any stretch. I believe in getting a good night's sleep, steak, and the love of a good woman, or man, or whatever lights your candle. I made some belief calls in my mid-teens and have stuck to them. Nope, not once did anyone try and save or convert me. In fact, my father marked the religion question as NA on the admission documents, and neither of us were ever questioned on it. If a prayer was ever said, I was asked first if that was okay, and a few times I did decline. Trust me, when you have been assisted to while lying down on your back with your legs in traction and experience the cleanup operation afterwards, it takes some time to want company again. The first few weeks I was on meds, morphine and tramadol being the options on the menu. They bunged me up, see bedpan comments above, and the docs warned me about dependency, so, with the exception of post-surgical relief, it was Panadol, Disprin, and Doxypol. So, if I remember right, the sisters all lived on the top floor of the hospital, so, technically, yes, there was someone living in the attic. Could the nuns have been pranking me? Absolutely. Despite perceptions, they are a funny bunch. Enjoy a good laugh, read comics, and watch Star Wars. Only there was never a, "Ha, we got you." Yup, it absolutely could have been a hallucination, ignoring the bum imprint on the bed. And yup, it absolutely could have been sleep paralysis. And yup, I absolutely could have actually dreamed it all. But OP asked what strange stuff had happened that I couldn't explain. No, I don't think she was Cthulhu or one of his followers, but I've been wrong about such things before. Edit. So, a few more things. I'm originally from, and this happened in Zimbabwe. The hospital is called Mater Dei, and no, I haven't found any record of a Sister Greta working there. The quick summary of what happened was that I was asleep in the back of a pickup on the way back from a rugby tournament. We had a head-on with a drunk driver, and I went through the back of the cab, the windscreen, hit the other car and ended up in the bush some meters away. Multiple internal injuries, lacerated liver, kidney damage, and collapsed lung, broken bones, ribs, jaw, collarbone, hip, and 3 crushed vertebrae, T12, L1, L2. The spinal cord was intact, but compressed, hence the lack of feeling and movement from my mid-torso down. The surgeries were to wire like my jaw up, decompress and remove bone fragments from my spinal column, and fuse the fecked vertebrae. I am now 2 inches shorter than I was and have a curve on my back that Quasimodo would be proud of. Despite this, I was the lucky one, and that's all I'm going to say about that. This being where it was, insurance and medical aid were really not much use. My dad paid most of the bills by emptying his savings and taking out a loan, and the rugby community pitched in as well. The hospital trust waived a bunch of the cost too. It was of a thing money-wise, but I have managed to pay back or pay forward it all. I don't quite get the nun plays a wild prank to raise money thing, but okay. I was never asked for money other than the bills which they led us to pay over. Literally, years. I also don't quite get the nun plays a wild prank to convert souls. Some morphine in my drip and a tart in a robe with a halo would have worked way better, and that's just off the top of my head. There was no attempt to save my soul. None. Last thing about this, being a nurse, or any other medical job, is a nasty, hard, selfless, and rewardless job from what I saw, and yet that is what they did. They cleaned up they helped me vomit, they sat while I cried my heart out for my friends and for my own future. They patiently put up with me when I got ranty and ravey. They found me blood when I needed it, because I have a stupid blood type. And they never ever told me to pray, look to God, count my blessings, thank the saints, or anything like that. They asked their God to help and then let me lean on them. Anyone calling bullshit, good on you. I wouldn't believe it either, and that's cool. Opinion is a wonderful thing. Okay, way too many of you are worried by some inside knowledge I may have on Cthulhu. I just accidentally holidayed at Arlaia one year. And let's just say the brochures didn't match the experience. Story 21. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before 2-hour open book final, I put my book in the middle of the floor so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning, it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back. Still nothing. By now, there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway and do the best I can. Naturally, when I get back, the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank, but how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. Story 22. It's a thing that happened to me firsthand. As a kid, I went to the kitchen downstairs late at night to get some snacks for midnight gaming. There was this bowl of candy on top of a shelf that my parents didn't think I knew about, so I grabbed a chair and had to stand on my toes to reach it. The bowl slipped from on top the shelf onto the floor, and I held my ears knowing there would be a sound of shattering glass in the middle of the night's silence, and I thought my parents would wake up and be mad at me. But there was no sound and no trace of the glass bowl or any candy at all on the floor. I was so flundered, so I just sat on the chair staring at the floor for a while before going back to my room wondering what just happened. A few days later, my mom was looking for the bowl, but it was nowhere to be found, and I never told anyone as they would just think I was crazy. Edit. Wow. First time I get this many upvotes. Thanks, guys. I don't know how awards work, but I see that I got one. If it means you spent money to give it to me, I am thankful. But please kindly consider donating it to a local shelter. Edit. From reading the comments, occurrences of this kind seem more common than I could have guessed. Interesting. Please continue to share your versions. Story 23. Outside my bedroom window was a paddock. And one morning I saw a rabbit running across towards the woods behind the paddock. It was a minimum of 5 foot tall. Edit. A little more detail and response to some common theories. It was bigger than a Flemish. I know they can get over 4 feet when stretched, but this lad was closer to 5 while still all hunched up. I had been awake for over an hour, so it wasn't a dream. My ex was with me and saw it as well. Same exact description as me. It was the brownish gray of a wild hare. The most rational explanation I can come up with, but still don't believe, is that it was a large gray kangaroo and was missing its tail. That would make it look more rabbit-like and could explain the way it moved. Story 24. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6 and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom, why is it Friday, when yesterday, it was Wednesday? She said yesterday was Thursday, obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. Story 25. So in 2013, I was smoking a cig with my buddy and his schizophrenic neighbor in Denton, Texas. This neighbor was the nice kind of off, never acting mean or violent. So we were actually pretty good friends. Anyway, during the middle of the cig, the neighbor acts like he just got hit with an energy wave and runs out into the yard. He begins to start rhythmically dancing and chanting about the meteor. What I could understand was that he felt the meteor, and he said that he felt it falling, and then with a final, he said the meteor had exploded. At that same time, on the other side of the world, an enormous meteor exploded over Russia. If you're wondering, no, there was no advanced warning. And yes, part of me does suspect that he somehow knew. Story 26. A long time ago, when I was in preschool, school had just ended and I was the first one, adult or child, at the exit, which was a tall gate with one of those C-shaped latches that slips over a pole to keep the gate shut. I walked up to it and reached for the latch, but alas, I was very small and the latch was at least 3 feet above me. I stepped back and decided to just wait for the adults to come set me free. But then the latch just lifted and the gate opened. I saw it clearly. There was nobody around and no one touched it. Still have no idea what that could have been. Childhood telekinesis? Who knows? Story 27. A tiny humanoid creature underwater. To this day, I still search the internet in hopes that what I saw was an actual type of fish, but I still haven't found anything. I was snorkeling at the age of 16 off the coast of Australia with my dad. Seeing all the fish was so beautiful. My dad drifted a little far from me, but there was a reef protecting us from any large sharks, so I wasn't scared of snorkeling on my own. I swam down towards the coral to get a closer look at a small octopus when something caught my eye. A human face. A human face with an eerie smile and big eyes. It was sort of standing, casually leaning against the coral with a body about 4 inches tall and head no bigger than a grape. It resembled a naked human male but had gills by its neck and webbed feet. Smooth all over like a Ken doll. I stared at him. He stared at me. I stared back and tried to rationalize what I was seeing. I reached out to touch him, and he casually evaded me by stepping to the side, all while his creepy smile remained. I could see my dad has turned around and was swimming closer to me. So I called him over to see this crazy creature. The creature turned toward where my dad was swimming over, seemed to notice him, then looked back at me coyly. Then it walked away. Like walked on its little webbed feet on the coral and disappeared down through a little hole on the rocks. I tried explaining to my dad when he came over, but he couldn't explain anything like that either. He just said something about Aboriginal spirits and I shouldn't mess with it. I swear I think about that little fish man every day. Okay, I was going to wait until tomorrow to draw this, but I actually could not sleep until I got it out of my head. This is the best I could do. It's goofy looking, but still sends chills down my spine to remember. Story 28. I was around the age of 10 and my younger sister was 7. Usually, whenever my sister was scared during the night, she would wake me up and so I would comfort her and tuck her in bed. However, this night was different and she was shaking me furiously and crying, couldn't speak, etc. So I rushed to her room and after a few minutes she could finally tell me that she could hear faint footsteps up and down the small hallway, outside our rooms. Our rooms are opposite from each other in the hallway. So we tried to be quiet and listen for the footsteps and couldn't hear anything and I thought, she must be hearing things, etc. Then after we calmed down, we started hearing the footsteps, and they were actually so clear it sounded like there was someone right outside the room. We both feared that someone broke into the house and was wandering around our house. So, funnily enough, I grabbed a pillow to protect myself and my sister in case the intruder came inside. At this stage, myself and my sister are both crying and nothing is happening. After 2 minutes of hearing footsteps, I gain the courage to scream, "Help!" And I run down to my parents' room on the other end of the house. Wake them up and let them know what happens. Dad checks the entire house plus backyard. Nothing. He then goes to sleep. Relieved, I decide to lay in my sister's bed with her so she is less shaken up from the situation. Around 15 minutes later, wide awake, a very, very loud screech happened in the kitchen for around 2 seconds, like something dragging on our floor tiles. Immediately, we both jump up and scream and cry. It was so loud my parents even woke up to see what it was. We left our room before my parents and saw our wooden kitchen chair somehow dragged on the tiles around 5 meters away from the kitchen table. We were all shocked and could not explain what happened. We thought it might have something to do with the footsteps. This is hands down the scariest thing I have ever gone through. Update. Wow. What a wonderful response to wake up to. Thanks everyone for the likes, comments, and awards. I see there are a few questions and theories that people do have, and I'd like to further elaborate on what happened after the event. I live in Australia. In the area I live in, there isn't a lot of wildlife other than birds, snakes, spiders. No raccoons, koalas, kangaroos, or larger type animals, etc. So I doubt any of those animals would have entered the house and caused the noise, moving chair, and the footsteps. My mother was still frightened a couple days later and decided to contact her friend that was a spiritual medium, I think. And my mom was told that there were around 40 bad spirits in our home at the time. She decided to get our house blessed with holy water. I didn't know this additional information until recently because she was afraid it would affect my sister and I even more. I wasn't a big believer in spirits or any sort of paranormal activity, but after our house was blessed and spirits were gone, nothing else has happened up until now. Parents are definitely not pranksters in the slightest. Highly doubt they would have tried to pull such a horrible prank on their children. I see many comments saying that there might have been someone who actually broke in and tried to loot or had some weird fantasy. There's a theory the intruder tried to escape and hit the chair on the way out, however. My dad did search the house to make sure no one was inside or outside. Also, no sign of a break-in. Everything was apparently still locked and closed. It is still so freaky that someone may have been in my house. It definitely sends chills down my spine thinking about that possibility. To be honest, I am leaning towards it being some sort of paranormal activity. My house was closed and locked everywhere, and we would have heard the intruder run or escape and close the back door, because my doors are quite loud when trying to open or close them. Story 29. As a full-grown adult, I was telling my mother about this house I was in with a dream I had. It was brown, had 2 bedrooms, 2 floors, L-shaped stairs. I went into full detail about this house from my dream. Anyway, apparently the house I described was the house I was born in. Not like born. I was born in a hospital, but the house my family lived in for 2 years prior to my birth, that we all moved out of when I was 7 or 8 months old. At first I thought maybe my brain got it from pictures I had seen, but honestly the level of detail wasn't shown in any pictures we had of me at such a young age. Mostly they were close-ups, so you couldn't really see the background much. Best guess to this day is my brain picking up really old and obscure memories. Other than that, I'm not sure how TF I knew anything about this house, let alone the layout, furniture setup, etc.